I'm Adrienne Enns, and I welcome you to the Intention Sessions podcast. I want to inspire our most intentional living. In each episode, we'll talk to remarkable individuals who will share their authentic journeys and their insights with us. They're going to remind us that life's complexities can be our greatest teachers, and that intentional living can be expressed in an infinite number of ways. I hope you find some inspiration for your most intentional life right here. Today on the podcast, we have Gurbeen Bhasin, and she is the founder and executive director of Aangen. It's a Toronto-based nonprofit organization that focuses on advancing food security and social justice locally and globally. She's a trained social worker and established Aangen in 2000, following in the footsteps of multiple ancestors who welcomed and supported community members facing challenges. She and her team run community service programs that help families in crisis access food, shelter, and other essentials. And that provides jobs and support services to those who have faced homeless, addiction, mental illness, and other barriers to sustainable employment. Aangen funds these programs by operating social enterprises that sell farm products and provide catering and cleaning services. Her primary purpose is to foster personal empowerment and nurture communities by responding to community needs as they arise with sustainable and equitable solutions. Her professional journey has included serving as project manager of a global human rights initiative, senior analyst for the Canadian Mental Health Association, and as an entrepreneur and creator in Toronto's independent art sector. Gurbeen holds a Master of Social Work degree from the University of Michigan, a Master of Arts degree in International Relations from the University of Windsor, and a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science from York University. She is best known for her mile-wide smile, her funky shoes, and her mom's timeless life wisdom. Gurbeen, I welcome you.
Thank you so much, Adrienne. Oh gosh, I feel like I'm blushing over here. You can't see it, but
I know it's always funny when people read your, accomplishments back to you. And I just wanted to, share all of that because I think it's important in placing, the work that you're doing today and where you come from. And I wanted to start. So I met you a few years ago, and I remember that we were at, Love Made Us Do It event run by Grail Springs. It was in December a few years ago in Toronto. And you were speaking. And one thing that really resonated with me was, number one, the incredible work you're doing now. But the way I remember hearing it was that it also just came out of a frustration, or at least that's how I interpreted it, with like how the social systems were working. And you were like, I love this work, but I don't like how it's working. And did I get that right?
yes, you sure did. Actually, that pretty much captures it. I was really, I was really committed to helping people and helping the planet, or like all these commitments that I had and all these passions that I wanted to spend my life working on, and yet they were really tied to funding and really looking at, who's going to give us a grant to do this, and how do we morph ourselves into, becoming what the grant is asking us to become. So I've learned that lesson very early on. I was probably about 25, 26. When I was studying my master's of social work, and my placement was at the Department of Social Services in Michigan. And part of my job was to evaluate grants that had come in, and see who we should fund. And boy, that was a really eye-opening experience when I would stay late, at work, and And, we had landlines back then, right? So they're punching in these numbers to all these different agencies and calling them at these like hours, like after work, to say, hey, you're missing this buzzword, or you're missing this particular idea of what we're looking for. If you can put that in, we can, give you more money, or, so it's kind of making their case for them a little bit.
Yeah.
And I went to my supervisor, who's still a very good friend, and I said to her, I'm like, Cheryl, why are we doing it this way? Like, why don't we just look at the needs in the area and per capita divide it and give it to the communities, because the communities will have more of a pulse on the ground of what's needed than we will. And we're sitting here in the state building. Like, how does that make any sense? So she encouraged me, actually, and that was life changing. She encouraged me. She said, well, find out. Go hold a focus group. Figure it out. This is a really good question. So I did that. And in that focus group, one particular caseworker, I'll never forget this for my whole life. She goes, well, you guys are asking us to help our clients become independent and not, rely on the system, and we're sitting across the desk from them, telling them how important it is to be independent. But if tomorrow you don't give us the grant that we've applied for, guess what? Guess what's going to happen? We're going to be sitting across the desk from somebody else who's going to tell us the importance of being independent. So the system, like, the way that she pointed it out was so clear to me that the system was flawed. It was
Hmm.
dichotomous. You know what I mean? It was
Yes.
completely um, illogical, like, and it just didn't make sense how it was set up. That we want people to be independent, and yet they're not independent themselves. So the grant-based system or the funding-based models are really dependency-based models, and I learned that early on, and decided that I didn't want to be part of that.
What a great lesson, though, because it can erode you otherwise.
hmm
So then tell us how you embarked on what you've been doing now.
Well, I mean, it really, really, truthfully, Adrian, it's been like a labor of love.
Hmm.
I After that point, like I said, at 25, I started to think about, like, well, how do we break out of this system? How do we think about making money? Because the key was, you got to make money. You got to make money to fund the community services. Like, how do you do that? And this was way before the word social enterprise really existed. And so I started to really think about, um, well, my dad was a businessman, and all of my uncles and, family members, so many of them are in business. And I was like, well, they make money. What do they do with it? How do they figure it out? And I remember my dad, um, like, paying for all the medical support and educational fees for all of his employees. Like, he had 5 factories, right? So he put in a lot of time and energy and effort and money into helping his people become educated, including their children, including, family members, and paid for all of their medical stuff. This is unheard of in the 70s in Iran, 70s and 80s. But he did it, and I was like, well, okay. So he made money, but he spent it in a way to support his employees. This is awesome. So I started to think about, like, well, um, you got to make money. Like, you got to figure out how to make money and then put it back into the community, right? So it was really trial and error. And then I moved back to Toronto after living in Michigan for a few years. And when I came back to Toronto, um, my mom and a few other women had founded this thing called Aangen. Like, they were kind of discussing it and organizing in there. And then literally they looked at me and said, "Oh, well, didn't you study social work? Like, you can do this."
We've got a spot for you.
Yeah, we've got a spot for you. Come figure this out with us. I'm sitting there at the table going, what am I doing? Like, I'm like, now at this point in my life, I had become a political consultant, and I was, doing a lot of like evaluation and policy writing and all kinds of stuff for political politicians really, and figuring out like very massive like policy changes. And I'm sitting here around the table with these awesome women who just want to help, right? And I'm like, okay, I don't really know how to do this, but I have some ideas. So that was in the year 2000, and one of the women who was one of the founders was a professor. She's fantastic, and she said, well, we should really apply for grants. And that's when the hair on the back of my
Yes.
neck got up, and I was like, no. So I explained what I had been through in my internship, and afterwards I actually ended up working for the state for a while. And I said, please don't go down this road. I'm not going to have anything to do with it. I'll be honest with you. I love you. I will support you. I'll do whatever you want, but I won't have anything to do with it on the front end because I don't believe in this. I really don't. And they're like, well, what do you believe in? And I explained to them, I'm like, we got to find a way to make our own money. When we find a way to make our own money, we'll be able to spend it the way that we need to. We won't have to ask anybody for permission. It's going to be hard. I knew that from the beginning. It's going to be hard, but it's going to be the price we pay for freedom. And that's pretty much what I believed from the get-go. And so they were like, okay, we'll give you a year. Let's give you a year and see where we go.
So that was, 20 years ago.
That was 20 years ago. Yep, that was 20 years ago.
I love it. And well, I mean, I shared it in your bio, but it's not like hearing it from you. I'd love for you to share with the listeners in your own words what you guys are up to.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so I want to preface all of this by saying,
Mm-hmm.
Adrienne, I didn't have a clue how any of this was going to happen. I just had this belief that it would happen and that I could stick to it long enough to ensure that it did. Like, when you have a gut feeling about something
Yes.
and you just know that this is what needs to happen. So, yeah. So
I love that.
it was like 14 years of me not taking a paycheck at all, zero, from Aangen. You read a little bit about in my bio that I managed a global human rights um, project, which is really quite large. And then I did a lot of other contracts, right, for other agencies and other organizations, and even in the arts world. Just because I needed part-time work to sustain, right?
Mm-hmm.
I needed. I always say I sold my brain. I literally sold my brain to survive, and that's what happened. So we like Aangen was my baby. It was something that I would do all the time, um, outside of the time that I was spending, working these other contracts and stuff. So, and I manipulated the work life system, in a sense that, hey, I can give you 3 days of my time. I cannot give you more than that. That was how I approached things, to say like, this is finite because the other aspect of my life is infinite. So I had a goal, that my time in my life was being dedicated to creating something rather different. So having said all that, what are we doing? So we started off with, you just mentioned that there's a tea out there that you love that we make.
It's the yogi tea.
Yep, the yogi tea. So that's a pretty famous one. my
So
it's
good.
my great grandma's recipe. So this,
Is it
of course,
really?
yeah. So it's Angan is a maternal lineage. So my great grandma started off by opening the doors, her doors, at her home every Wednesday. They would have like a gathering of anybody, like didn't matter race, color, creed, religion, anything, people would get together and they would meditate, and she would make soup, and then they would talk about who needed help, etc., etc. So she literally like did that. Apparently, my mom just told me recently that her father used to do something similar. So it's very interesting. I'm just learning more and more about the history of it. So then that got passed on to my grandma, got passed on to my mom, and then passed down to me. And so the recipes continued. And so when people would come to our home and drink this tea that you love so much, we started to joke around and say, God, if we could only bottle it. And then we found out a way to bottle it. So we did. We bottled the yogi tea, we bottled the healing tea. We also bottled the summer rose tea. And I went to the St. Lawrence market and started to sell there. And then slowly people be like, oh, okay, that's cool. Well, who are you guys? What do you do? You know, so it kind of became like an outreach thing. And then the next person like came along and said, you know, I wish you would have honey because I like to put honey in my tea. And I said, oh, okay, I could do that. I can get you honey. Um, of course, by this point, my mom had moved up north, kind of close to Hockley Valley, near Orangeville, and she had a local beekeeper that would provide her honey. So I
Of
went
course
to
she
the local
did.
beekeeper. Of course she did, right? Like it just so
Yeah.
happened. And so I went to the local beekeeper and I said, hey, listen, so can I buy a few cases off of you? Sure, of course. So then we bought that and then I started to market that. And so the honey went with the tea. And then one day somebody said, well, I'm vegan. I don't use honey. How about some maple syrup? Well, okay. I'm like, oh, I think I can get you that, you know? And so I went back to my mom and like, Mom, we need to find a maple syrup. Oh, she goes, oh yeah, there's one up the road. I just saw a sign. So we went together and before you knew it,
I
we had
love
maple
this.
syrup. So we had maple syrup at the table and that sort of happened. And then of course we were doing all kinds of helping people in the back end, right? Like people who needed support and stuff like that. And then one fine day is when it really all started to happen. About 10 years ago, I went to a cafe where I was teaching the owner of the cafe how to make chai from our yogi tea blend. And we were goofing around, having fun at the barista. We were playing baristas basically and having a really good time. And yeah, and so as I was leaving the cafe, she said to me, hey, listen, do you know where I can get farm fresh eggs? And I said, well, actually, as a matter of fact, I do. I go up to see my mom and I pick up a dozen eggs, like, you know, uh, do you want me to get you some? And she's like, yes, please. So, of course, the next week when I went up, I came back with an extra dozen eggs from the local farmer. She's the most adorable farmer you've ever met. Little old lady, Dorothy, sweet as can be. Um, and I came back with a dozen eggs for the cafe owner. And I was like, here, you know, and she's like, well, how much do I was like, nah, don't worry about it. Like, you know, it's okay. You know, you can buy me a sandwich sometime at your cafe, whatever. It was no big deal. So she called me and she was like, oh my God, these are the best eggs I've ever had. And I was like, yeah, they're pretty good, eh? Like, and she was like, yeah, can you give me 5 dozen next week? And I was like, oh, okay. So then
It
I was
sounds
like,
like
I
a
guess
fairy tale. You know, like
I
you
know.
just keep going to, I know it's your mom, but like to grandma's house and getting one
Yeah.
more thing.
Hmm. It's so funny, right? So I'm like, okay, like, what do I do now? So I'm talking to my mom. I'm talking to Dora. You know, Dora is my spiritual mentor and godmother as well. I've adopted him. Like you're now my godmother. I've decided. So anyway, she's my mom's best friend. So we joke around. And we call each we have like the little triad. We call it the spiritual mafia. So I'm like,
Love
I'm like,
it.
hey guys, I know. I'm like, what do we do? She wants fun. And they're like, oh, that's fantastic, but you have to charge her. Now you have to start charging her. She's got a business. I'm like, well, I don't know what to charge her. Like, what do you charge her? So then we joked about it and we chatted it out. And then I went back and Amelia's like, well, what do I owe you? Like the cafe owner, she's like, hey, what do I owe you? I'm like, how about like $5 a dozen, like or something, that'll cover my gas or whatever. She's like, oh God, yeah, absolutely, no problem. Well, 5 dozen turned to 10 dozen, turned to 20, and it just went like that. And I was like, oh, and then poor little Dorothy, the farmer, was like, oh my God, you guys are buying me out eggs every week. And I was like, I'm sorry. She's like, and then she started to tell me, oh, there's bigger farms, this and that. So I was like, okay. And then Amelia started to tell other people, and I was like, oh, well, I guess if she needs eggs every week, I suppose other people do too, right?
Yeah.
And then, so, kind of word of mouth happened. And then I started to get more orders. And then, she said to me one time, hey, so what about butter? And I was like, oh, well, actually, my mom knows these guys in Alliston. And in fact, Adrian, they're the only local creamery left in all of Ontario, Alliston Creamery.
Wow.
Yeah. So we've
That's
even
hard to
working with them.
believe.
Yeah, no, everybody's bought like Gailey and those big guys have bought everybody out. It's crazy. So we're very much about supporting local, right? So we really stick to that. Anyway, so before you knew it, I was bringing butter down and then maple and then this, and then we met a bread maker, like, a baker, and I was bringing bread, and I was like, oh my God, this is becoming a thing,
Yeah, a big thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it became a thing. So like, it's a little crazy. So yeah, I mean, so the farm products took off like you wouldn't believe. I had to like, move from the local farmers that I could go to myself to a grading station because I started to learn that, oh, if you're selling eggs, they have to be graded, they have to be this, then you have to get a refrigerated van. I mean, it just blew up, right? Like we went from 1 dozen to like 1,000 or more,
Wow.
a week. It just sort of became a thing. And people knew that we were doing good in the world with it, So it's like we can pay our bills and we can do good in the world. So this is kind of cool. And then,
Very cool.
yeah, very cool. And so one of the women that we were helping, I needed to find housing for her. And I would say about 8 years ago, about 8 years ago, I met with a housing manager who has since become a very good friend, like a sister to me. And it's like, hey, so you got to help me find housing for this woman. And we sort of joked about it, but we had to, do some very interesting things to get housing for her. we jumped
I'm
through a lot of
curious, but
hoops.
I'm guessing you can't
I
really
know.
say.
Yeah, I can't,
We'll just leave
really
it to our
talk about.
imaginations.
Yeah, we just got creative. What can I say? We
Okay.
got creative, and we got our housing, which was fantastic. And she is a survivor of probably the worst domestic violence I had witnessed in my 25 years as a social worker. Yeah, it was really intense situation. But we knew come hell or high water, we had to get her safe and we had to get her housing. And so we did. And it was such a moment to celebrate. Oh my God, I can't even tell you. Like I cried literally, like as we moved her in.
Oh.
And it was incredible. And so 2 weeks after that happened, this is so funny. The same manager who's now a director calls me and says, hey, listen, my office cleaner has gone AWOL. And I was like, oh my God, what? And then she said, do you think, and I was like, yes, yes, yes. The answer is yes. Because I knew that this woman was looking for a job. I knew she didn't want Aangen to pay for her, her housing indefinitely. She's a very independent-minded woman, and very like, she wants to work. She wants to be productive. And I was like, yes, yeah. The answer is yes. Let's do it. Let's make it happen. How do we figure it out? So we started with a tiny little job for her to go and clean this office once a week. And so Aangen did the billing. She did the work. We paid her. And that was the end of that. And then there was like, oh, there's another unit. Oh, there's another this. There's another that. And before you knew it, we got like so much work for this woman. And then the same woman, the manager, called me and she goes, "Hey, listen, so there's this guy who is in danger of getting evicted. Can you hire him?" And I was like, sure. Like, do you have more jobs? Because I'll need more jobs than what I've got for this other woman, right? So she was like, yes, 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 I'll get you more jobs. Leave that to me, but can you hire him so he doesn't get evicted? And then I can show that he's got like a job lined up. And like, okay. So that became a thing. Before you knew it, we were cleaning places and offices. And again, like word of mouth started to happen.
That's
And
just so awesome.
right, like it was like one of those things that it just started to happen. And then it became like not just me and two part-time people. I needed some additional support. And so luckily I found someone who was so excited and eager to jump on this and work with me. It was incredible. And then, well, yeah, so Heather and I started to work together and we built like the farm part, because then we had to pay her, a salary.
Mm-hmm.
And then I hadn't taken a salary in 14 years from Aangen. So I was like, well, I got to pay her a salary and then I got to pay me a salary because I don't want to work anywhere else. I'm kind of done with working anywhere else.
And
So,
you deserve it,
well, yeah, like it became a thing that this is what we needed to generate. So then we went from when I was working part-time, I was generating about $40,000 in farm product sales. When her and I started to work together, within, I'm going to say less than 2 years, we increased that to $250,000 in sales for farm products. So we just went gangbusters. We're like, we got to do this, we got to do this, we got to do this. And I mean, that's sales, but like, you have to pay expenses. I mean, we didn't have any money left by the end of it, but at least we got our expenses covered. And that was the most important thing to me. And then the cleaning sort of took on this life of its own. I didn't even know what was happening. And a whole new business started to form. So then that director obviously was telling other directors. And then in 2017, we got a call that, hey, listen, we're trying to convert a multi-use space into a women's shelter for the night. But then we need the cot set up at night. We need the cots taken down in the morning. Can you guys do this? And I'm like, sure, why not?
I love it. All the stories start with, hey, listen. And then you say yes. And then it's a thing.
And then it's a thing. So like, yeah.
I caught onto the theme.
Well, that's it, right? So it's like, I'm going to show up as a yes, because every time I show up as a yes, good things happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So then I had to hire more people. All of a sudden, Aangen became like, from the two part-time people and me to 3 full-time people and 8 part-time staff all of a sudden, because we had to do like 7 days a week, shifts.
Yeah.
With morning and evening. So it became a thing, and I needed somebody to help me manage it and all that. It all started to happen kind of randomly and very serendipitously. So then that happened. And then the winter of 2018, if you recall, was very, very severe. And people were dying on the streets that were homeless because the winter was so awful. And so they set up these respites, right? So like they set up these respite shelters. And the same director who called me in to set up the women's shelter at night called me again. You're going to love this one. So she's like, hey, so yeah, I hear you do something with food. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like we do a lot with food. Like we run a small cafe in the park, and we have these farm products. Like, what do you need? Tell me what's going on for you. She goes, oh my God, you're not going to believe this. The city is setting up these respites. I've been asked to take on one of the respites. We have 300 people, 350 people, whatever, at the BLC, the Better Living Center. They had started out there in Ontario Place, and I need food, and I was like, what does that mean? Like, what do you mean you need food?
Yeah.
Like, she goes, I need 300 breakfast, 300 lunch, and 300 dinner. So I'm going to be honest and say I had no idea what that meant. I
Yeah.
probably didn't even hear it or process it that way. All I heard is we need food for people who are hungry.
Yes.
And I said,
Yes.
yes. The answer is yes. Now, I had a really big job on my hands. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how it was all going to work out, but I just knew it had to happen. So all of a sudden, within like literally within less than a week, Adrian, I had to pull together staff. I had to pull together resources. I hired probably 10 extra people right then and there to get it done. And I needed a kitchen, like
Oh,
a commercial
that.
kitchen. I mean, yeah, yeah, right. And then there's that. We had the cafe.
Yes.
That was not anywhere close to what we needed. We need like massive kind of. I mean, it's not a joke to produce 1,000 meals a day, right? Because staff
No.
are eating everything. You got to produce extras and stuff like that. So I'm like, oh, good God. So then I called my good friend Anna Baila, who is now the deputy mayor of Toronto, um, and a really big supporter. I'm like, Anna, I need a kitchen. I need it bad. Like, like this is what's going down. And so she was able to find some underutilized properties, and one of them really worked for us, and we're still there.
That's
Um,
amazing.
yeah, so we got a commercial kitchen. I've never seen the city move so fast in my life. Like literally within 8 working days, I had a signed contract, keys, we're in, we've moved. So yeah, so that happened, and since then we've made over 500,000 meals for the homeless.
So, I have chills. Just I had chills like through the other stories, but this one is just it's really remarkable. It's so amazing. And they're they're lucky to have you. They're lucky for that. Yes.
Well, I mean, I don't know whether it's luck or just sheer faith. You know what I mean? On
Yes, I
some
know luck
level,
is
it's
not the
like,
right word, but
no. I mean, I hear you with like it is like obviously people um, feel comfortable enough to say, "Hey, listen," to me, which is really awesome. But I think what's also kind of cool is just knowing that we're going to do it, come hell or
yes,
high water. If there's a need in the community, we will do our best to fill that need. You
that's
know.
what I love. I just think that's beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you.
And so, how has your work been impacted this year?
Oh, good question. Yeah, so of course, the restaurants had to close. Again, we're
Hmm.
back at that place. Inside dining is closed. So, yeah, the restaurants have taken a really, really big hit, which of course means our farm products have taken a really big hit, which has been tough without question. But we really pivoted and went. We wanted to make sure that people had food, so we went straight for the grocers. We do work with a lot of grocery stores, but we really really knew. I remember that week when the restaurants had to close, and um, people were starting to fight over toilet paper.
Hmm.
Um, and I was like, wait a second, people are going to worry that there's not enough food. That's what's going to happen. And so I
Absolutely.
started calling all the grocers that I knew, to say, guys, stock your shelves, just stock them, because people are going to freak out. And yeah, I was right. And they stopped, and so they were very, very happy for that call. I think, they thanked me afterwards because they were worried. They were really worried. I mean, it was like almost daily, just for a couple weeks anyway. where we were running to the grocers all the time to make sure that they were taken care of. So that was a bit of a interesting challenge. The other thing in the cleaning world, of course, offices were closed, so we took a bit of a hit on the office cleaning as well as the restaurant cleaning, of course. But then we started to think about disinfecting because it was like, wait a second, guys, people are going to want to make sure that they're being safe wherever they go into. So we started to focus on disinfecting, and now we've got a certified program that we offer at Aangen. So our team has been trained and properly certified to do disinfecting for businesses specifically. And yeah, and as far as the catering and food services is concerned, again, we had to our shelter was the very first one that had an outbreak or a
Oh,
positive case, and so we're like, whoa. So like literally within an hour, I had to re-strategize how to keep my people safe as well and make sure that the shelter was still supported. So we went, whereas we would go in and we would serve the food and have a real connection with the clients. Unfortunately, because of COVID, we had to pull back on the service aspect, which is really probably my favorite part, but
yeah, I would think
but
so.
yeah, but we went to a delivery model, and so we had to like literally hand uh, the trays of food to the people. But interestingly enough, I'm going to say, as much as we've been impacted by COVID, it has also given us that necessary spaciousness to create. Um, and I always feel that in times of uncertainty is where you get to create, and I really believe that to be true, especially now. So one of the things that I've been always interested in is helping the seniors. My own mom is a 75-year-old where, we've been interviewing caregivers to support her. Uh, but what I realized is I mean, we have such a passion for food at Ungan, and really healthy local food. Um, and also food rescue. We do a lot in that world. But how do we get really healthy, nutritious meals to seniors? So we are now in the process of creating um, a beautiful program for people to get food um, that is very nutritious and very easy to use. So we're going to be making packages of dehydrated soups and oatmeals and different meals that people can just boil a kettle and literally pour it in, and there you go, you've got your meal. So we're working on that, which is really exciting.
That's amazing. And like through all of this, how do you keep your cup filled?
Hmm. It's a really good question, actually. I think I think for me, uh, finding joy and gratitude in the little things is really important. Like I love having the moments, the strings of moments that come together where you have a
Yeah.
beautiful conversation and just enjoy that moment for what it is and attach it to the next moment that's coming along. The other part of it is really self care, right? A lot of it,
Yes.
I must say, since April, after COVID happened, I gave myself the challenge of because I have a compromised immune system and I really had to live in isolation for months, other than one other person that I could see regularly. Um, but literally, it was me and this other person, and everybody else was at a distance or on Zoom or something. So I was like, okay, you need self care. You're gonna take up running. Okay, I'm not a runner. I'm gonna tell you that right now. But it's something that I can do on my own. So I
Yes.
started off like walking, half a lap and then running half a lap or a quarter of a lap or this, that kind of thing. And I built myself up to, um, to the place where I can easily run about 8 to 10K now, no problem, and enjoy it. Like I'm not like stressed out over it. I'm having fun. So I've taken up running. I do meditation. I eat well, and just give give myself what I need, the tools that I need to live a premium quality life.
It's amazing. I want to thank you so much, like, for taking the time today. I love this whole story from, where you started to all of these people calling you. And in doing the podcast this year, a lot of people have talked about, like the yoga of service, of just, giving back, and how this cycle just is also self-care in a way. We have to take care of ourselves, but it helps too. So I just admire your work so much. And before we
Thank you.
say goodbye, I'm just curious, if there's anything, that you feel got missed, or that you want to say, or that you want to impart on anybody listening. Love for you to share it.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for asking me to do this. It's been a real pleasure. Sometimes I don't sit down long enough to reflect on what's really happened. So
Yeah.
it's really kind of nice to do that. I would say, if I had anything to impart, and that would be, know your truth and stand on your truth. You know, like really, really believe in what it is that you're creating. Have that vision and hold that vision. Um, I didn't know that when I was doodling in grad school of how to make money and then how to serve the community and all that. I didn't realize I was making a vision board, but I made a vision board.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. Like I didn't realize, I didn't have those tools. I didn't know the names of the things that I was doing. But if I can just emphasize to people how important it is to have a vision, how important it is to really believe in what your purpose is. And don't let anybody get in the way of that. Like don't let the negative thoughts or the naysayers bring you down. Believe in yourself and make it happen. Like find a way to make it happen. Because we're all born with a purpose, and each one of us is unique in that beautiful way. And no one else can tell you what your purpose is other than you. So stay strong and hang with it.
I love it. That was beautifully said. Yes, I thank you for your time and just all the beautiful work you're doing in the world. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Adrienne, for having me on your podcast.
Thank you for listening. May some of the wisdom shared here inspire your most intentional living. For more information about this episode, this podcast, intentional living, and my work in the world, please visit mayyouknowjoy.com. You can also find my May You Know Joy and Seeds of Intention cards there, and my book, Intentional Days. You'll also find details for the Intentional Days membership, where you can gain access to a thriving community of intentional souls and lots of regular inspiration. I've got you covered. Until next time, I wish you great joy and many intentional days.